Good morning. We've been on a little bit of a journey. We've been going through Galatians, but for a longer period, we've been on a journey where it's almost like God is changing the lens that we look through when we see and think about and understand the gospel, the message of Jesus. And really, I was trying to think, what type of story is it? What type of story is this whole Christianity stuff? And it's really almost like a story of a homecoming, or a restoration, or a rescue. It's a story of God coming back to his people again. He would be our God, we would be his people, that he returns. And it's like a family restoration. It's not simply that we sinned and Jesus died and forgiveness and all that. That is part of it. But we miss so much if we don't have a bigger picture. And maybe the bigger picture to have might be helpful. Kind of think of a homecoming, a family coming together again. And we've been in Galatians, and 2 weeks ago we started working our way through the list of reasons why Paul was encouraging the church in Galatia to hold on to the gospel that he preached to them and not hold on to any other gospel, including any kind of compromise on the freedom of the good news, no matter how sincere it seemed, how religious it seemed, to accept any other gospel would alienate them from Jesus. And we looked, the first two reasons, they were from the history of the early church, the pillars of the church, James, Peter, John. When they met Paul, they extended to him the right hand of fellowship. In other words, they're saying, Paul, your gospel is our gospel. And then the second reason was that whole interaction with Peter, when Peter stopped eating with the Gentiles and they turned away, he separated from them, the Gentile Christians, and Paul opposed them publicly. So their first two. Then last week, I think it was, we saw his kind of theological reason, which was a little bit heavy, but where he was saying that through the law, this trying to obey and relate to God based on our obedience, we died to that, so as that actually we could live this new kind of life that Jesus gives us, this Zoe life, if you're a C.S. Lewis fan, not based on observing the law, but based on trusting in the faithfulness of Christ. But remember, the whole thing is that the church itself is at stake for Paul, so he's going to take out all the guns that he has and shoot against this false gospel. So we're up to his reason number 4, and he started in Galatians chapter 3, and this is it. So this is his 4th reason not to go down the road of Jesus plus the law, or Jesus plus we have to be obedient in some certain way to earn God's approval. So he starts off and he says, you foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? Before your very eyes, Jesus Christ was clearly portrayed as crucified. I would like to learn just one thing from you. Did you receive the Spirit by the works of the law, or by believing what you heard? Are you so foolish? After beginning by means of the Spirit. So this is the second time he's called them foolish or stupid. After beginning by means of the Spirit, are you now trying to finish by means of your own efforts at holiness? Have you suffered so much in vain, if it really was in vain? So again, I ask you, does God give you the Spirit and work miracles? The word miracles, it really is, the word is acts of power. Does God give you a Spirit and do works of power among you by works of the law, or by believing what you heard? So what's he saying? He's actually saying, his reason number 4 is, the reason you hold on to the gospel I preach to you is the experienced presence of the Spirit in their midst. They experienced God making his home among them. And that's his reason. So remember, Paul is still trying to answer the question, who are the people of God? Who's the family of God? What's needed for membership in the family of God? And this reason is, you've received the Spirit. He's appealing to something that they actually experienced. You see, like if you think about it, we've been Christians our Christianity has been around for 2,000 odd years. It seems really sensible, but actually it's not. Like if you were to think about it, if you've never heard about it before, okay, there's a God, we can get that, but actually he gets crucified. That's kind of weird. He gets crucified. Why? What's the point? Like he's God, he's all powerful, surely. It's actually kind of nonsense, really, if you were to think about it. And then he's risen. Well, what's that supposed to mean? It really is nonsense. And it's even more nonsense back then because they were familiar with crucifixion. That's what defeated people do. That's not what happens to kings. That's like humiliation itself. The only reason they would have for believing it is if something happened to them that caused them to say it must be true. It's nonsense, it's unbelievable, but it must be true. In spite of everything that they should know. And what happened was they experienced the Spirit. And they responded to this weird gospel. No matter how illogical or ridiculous, it must be true. To quote that great biblical scholar, Sherlock Holmes, when you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, it must be the truth. It simply must be true, no matter how much nonsense it is. Let me give some illustrations to understand how nonsensical the gospel sounded to people back then and should sound to us. It would be kind of like someone telling you that the world is flat. Imagine someone telling you that the world is flat, and they showed you the picture. It's flat. You would completely dismiss them as some sort of idiot. You're just like an idiot. What is the only way that you could get convinced that the world was flat? What's the only way that you could be convinced that the world was flat? Is if they took you to the edge and you stepped over and fell off. That's the only way you could be convinced that the world was flat. Because you experienced it for yourself. Then you'd believe it, no matter how stupid it sounded, no matter what all the science says. You fell off, so it must be true. Something like that is what Paul is appealing to. He basically is saying, you received the Spirit of God when you believed the message about this crucified Messiah or King. The presence of God is your proof. God's longed for return has happened to you. So that's first illustration. Second illustration. Our children are American citizens. Their mother is American. And through that fact, they qualify for an American passport. They have American passports. Even though they were born here, they lived their whole lives here, they have Irish accents, they have American passports. Now, supposing one of our children want to go to America with a friend of his who was born here in Ireland and has two Irish parents. And the friend of my son says, you're not really American. You don't talk with an American accent. You don't know any American history. You don't play baseball. You don't like hot dogs. You're not American. Whereas my son's friend says, I am American. Look, I think I have something there. I'm American. I wear cowboy boots. I have a cowboy hat. I chew chewing gum. I love baseball and hot dogs. And I've practiced my American accent. I'm American. So they go to immigration, and my son and his friend, and my son's friend is thinking, like, the other guy's not going to get through. Look, I'm so American looking. And what's going to happen at immigration? What's going to happen? Our son gets in and the cowboy is rejected. Because our son has the passport. It's the only thing that qualifies him as a citizen, and it's the only evidence that he needs. The Spirit is the only evidence you need for membership in God's family, Paul tells the Galatians. You have all the evidence that you need to prove or to validate that you're the family of God. Ignore what those other guys are saying, that you have to get circumcised. The Spirit is your evidence, given that they have experienced the Spirit. So let's look through those verses again, going through his argument. He says, you foolish Galatians, like they've stepped off the side of the world and fell. They know it's real. And he says, you foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? And that word, like, he's saying, he's given out to them, but the word bewitched is kind of like, who has put an evil eye on you? He says, like, it's an act of pure stupidity. And it's as if someone's cast a spell on them. And Paul may well mean it literally, that there's a demonic power behind this thing that's happening. So understanding what it means to be God's family actually is also a matter of spiritual warfare. Satan, it says, who has blinded the minds of unbelievers, will try to bewitch believers, to darken their understanding, so that they return to a gospel that seems so spiritual, but it's no gospel at all. And then in verse 2, he says, who's bewitched you? Before your eyes, Christ was clearly portrayed as crucified, the gospel. I would like to know, verse 2, one thing from you. Did you receive the Spirit by works of the law, by your obedience, or by believing what you heard? He's appealing to something that happened to them. It actually happened to them. Something they will remember and can't deny. The Spirit actually happened to them. What happened to you? What happened to you? Is it just a list of things that you believe? Or did something actually happen to you? Did the Spirit happen to you? What includes us in God's family? It's an experience-based belief, not just mental assent to a creed. And then he continues in verse 3, he calls them stupid again. Are you so foolish? After beginning by means of the Spirit, are you now trying to finish by means of your own efforts at holiness? Like, are you crazy? Are you crazy? You started with the Spirit, family through the Spirit. Now you want to finish the journey by your own efforts at being holy. N.T. Wright, he gives a good example about how stupid that is. And there's this guy years ago called, what's his name? Charles Blondin. He was a tightrope walker in the 19th century. And he used to set up a rope across Niagara Falls, and he'd walk back and forward across Niagara Falls. And he was so confident in the journey that he would do it backwards. And sometimes he would sit on a stool and eat a meal in the middle of it. But his most famous trick was when he asked for a volunteer to be carried on his back. Now, supposing halfway across The guy who's on his back says, you know what? You've got me this far. I'm going to do the rest by myself. What would you think? Has he gone mad? Have you gone mad? That's exactly Paul's reaction. Have you gone mad? Who has cast a spell on you? Are you out of your minds? Twice he's called them foolish and bewitched. It's like they've lost the power to think straight. Having begun in the Spirit, do they think they're going to continue in their own efforts? Having begun with faith or trust, do they think now observing the law is going to do it? It was madness. And remember what's at stake. This isn't just intellectual stuff for Paul. What's at stake is the very gospel itself, the church itself. What qualifies people to be the people of God? What gives them their identity? And then in Galatians 4, he says, have you suffered so much in vain if it really was in vain? These guys are really sincere. They're not saying, let's go out and get drunk every night. They really want to go after Jesus. And they have suffered a lot. But was it in vain? They would have been probably ostracized by a society, losing jobs. And now you're abandoning Jesus. Paul is staggered by it. What they're being tempted to do, no matter how sincere it seems. And then again in verse 5, he goes back and he says, so again I ask, does God give you his Spirit and works of power among you by the works of the law or by you believing what you've heard? It's the evidence of the Spirit that should tell you you're fully accepted, part of God's family, filled by the Spirit. And what that's saying is, you know what? There's nothing that you have done to exclude yourself. No thing you walked into that excludes you from God's family. But if you decide to earn it, you get in trouble. And what's really interesting, see where it says there's miracles or works of power. Paul doesn't say there should be works of power. It's really interesting. He doesn't say there should be works of power. What's he doing? He's assuming they're taking place. He's assuming it's happening. It's like he's arguing from the place of, well, of course. It's God's church. It's his Spirit. Of course there's works of power. It's something the Galatians can't deny. And Paul's churches were churches, but they're also spirit churches. He just assumes it. And he doesn't go into what the works of power are. They're plural. And it would seem like they're regular and normal. And the word it's present tense. The works of power are ongoing. It's not just when you get converted. It's this ongoing works of power among them. To be honest, I find that quite challenging. To assume there's works of power whenever God's people gather together. Paul later on is going to describe what it was like when he first came to town. As you know, it was because of an illness. Now, they translated illness, it was a frailty, they're not 100% sure it was, but when I first preached the gospel to you, and even though I was frail, and it was a trial to you, you did not treat me with contempt. Instead, you welcomed me as if I were an angel of God, as if I were Christ himself. Again, we read that and kind of don't pay attention to it. Paul is saying, I arrived in town, I wasn't in good shape. Some people think it was an illness. Some people wonder, because he arrives in town after being stoned with stones. What might he have looked like after being left for dead after being stoned, he probably looked a little bit like this, like someone who'd been 15 rounds with a boxer and lost. This is what came to town. Something like this. Not the best look for someone claiming to have good news about a new kind of life. Not to mention the nonsense of a crucified Messiah. And you know what's so weird? What is so weird? This came to town preaching a message of a crucified Messiah, which was nonsense. And something happened in people's hearts that said, this is true. No matter how improbable, no matter how weird, this is true. Because the Spirit came to them. They encountered the Spirit. Now, there's no formula for what that looks like. Paul himself, it was very dramatic on the road to Damascus. John Wesley was sitting listening to a message like a sermon, and he said, my heart was strangely warmed. C.S. Lewis was an atheist, went out on a motorbike ride, and he says, I don't know what exactly happened, but I came back after that motorbike ride and I was a Christian. He said, I was the most reluctant convert in all of Britain. In Philippi, Lydia, she probably had her heart strangely warmed, but one of the women had a demon cast out of them, and that was the journey. So what was happening? It was our spirit somehow connects with God's Spirit. It was made to resonate with God's Spirit, and when God's Spirit is here among His people, something happens. It's kind of like, you know what our spirit says in the presence of God's Spirit? You know what it says? Abba, Father. Abba, Father. And remember this, I'll get rid of him. This encounter, Paul says, is ongoing. It's not just at conversion. The tense he uses that it's present and ongoing. If Paul was Irish, you know the way he'd say that? He would say something like, does God be doing miracles among you? Does he be doing them? Of course. We have a lot of our hearts strangely warmed. We have less healing. I don't know why that is. But I know the Spirit wants to continually minister among us. And what's interesting about the Spirit, Paul says two things. Eagerly desire and do not quench. Isn't that strange? That we can actually quench the Spirit of God in our meetings. And we can eagerly desire. And each one of us know where we are on that continuum. Do you want, Amy and Chris, do you guys want to come up? But it's clear from Paul's writing that the Galatians clearly expected it. They expected the presence of the Holy Spirit to do something experiential, undeniable among them. So what I'd like to do is just invite us to stand and just pause for a minute in the presence of the Holy Spirit and invite Him to be among us and to continue to be here. So can I just invite you to stand, and you can keep your eyes open or closed. Does God do works of power among you? because you are good and obedient, or because you simply trust in the goodness of Jesus. Holy Spirit, we invite you. For those who feel comfortable, just hold your hands out. Holy Spirit, we invite you. We invite you. Come, Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit. Just in your own mind, just welcome him. Come, Holy Spirit. We welcome you. Increase your presence, increase your power. Fall in power now, Lord. Fall in power, Lord. Just increase it. Just continue to wait, and if you have that awareness of his presence, just say, Lord, I welcome you. I welcome you. Does God do works of power among you because you observe the law, or you simply believe in the goodness of Jesus? More, Lord. More of your presence. Lord, would you just lift off weariness just in your presence? Mary, I don't know if you're feeling weary or not. I just have that word over you. Lord, would you lift off weariness of Mary? Just more. More. Lord, would you give us a hunger for your Spirit? We would be the eagerly desire people, not the quenching people. Just more of your presence. More of your presence. Just continue being aware of his presence as we now worship our Jesus.